Hello and welcome back to the latest episode of Goji's Thrift Box. And yes, this box is a bit smaller than the one we saw in the previous episode. I do have two thrift boxes. One for larger items and this one for smaller items because I don't want anything to get lost or broken. So let's see what comes out of the thrift box today. Well, I think we all know who this dastardly villain is. But let's learn a little bit more about him. Alexander Joseph Lex Luthor first appeared in Action Comics number 23 in 1940. In his original appearances, Lex was a mad criminal genius whose schemes centered around financial gain or megamaniacal power. In those original appearances, Lex was shown with a full head of red hair. But less than a year later, due to a mix-up in the art, he was shown to be bald, and that's been one of his defining traits ever since. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, DC began recreating and reintroducing many of its Golden Age heroes. The introduction of the new Flash, aka Barry Allen, began what we know to be the Silver Age of comics. Lex Luthor's introduction into the Silver Age was in Adventure Comics number 271 in 1960. Lex's origin was updated for the Silver Age. Young Luthor was a scientific genius who admired Superboy. One day there was an accident at Lex's lab in which Superboy intervened to save Lex. Unfortunately, the accident resulted in Lex losing all of his hair, for which he blamed Superboy.
With this chunk of kryptonite I removed from the gully, I'll be able to repay Superboy for this wonderful lab. There, I've done it. I've created a kryptonite antidote. Soon Superboy will be totally indestructible. Deadly fumes. Can't breathe.
Oh no, there's smoke coming from Lex Luthor's lab. My super breath will extinguish it. Lex, are you all right?
You rat! Your super breath destroyed my lab and blew the gas fumes at me, causing my hair to fall out.
But it was an accident.
Don't lie. You were jealous of my genius. Now you'll never have this kryptonite antidote I invented for you. And I will use all of my scientific genius to one day destroy you.
Lex Luthor has continuously used his scientific genius to battle Superman, matching the Man of Steel's physical strength against the power of his evil mind. During DC's Silver Age of comics, they established the idea of the multiverse, multiple Earths existing at the same time on different dimensional planes. DC's Golden Age of stories was said to have taken place on Earth 2, so that the Golden Age and Silver Age versions of each character could exist simultaneously and cross over with each other. So the Golden Age version of Luthor was retconned to exist on Earth 2. To differentiate between the Luthors, the Earth 2 Luthor kept his full head of red hair, and his name was said to be Alexei rather than Alexander. In 1985, DC created the massive crossover event Crisis on Infinite Earths, which brought together hundreds of heroes and villains from many of the Earths in DC's multiverse. During that event, the Earth 2 version of Luthor was unceremoniously killed by Brainiac. After Crisis on Infinite Earths, the entire DC universe was rebooted by wiping out the multiverse and starting over with one single Earth. One of the biggest parts of that reboot was the reinvention of the Superman mythology, starting with John Byrne's miniseries Man of Steel. It was in this series that Lex Luthor was reintroduced and reinvented as the evil CEO of the giant corporation LexCorp. This version of Luthor as evil corporate executive has informed the character ever since, with many modern interpretations of the character melding the evil corporate CEO with the mad scientific genius version. Over the decades, Lex Luthor has been involved with and has led many different supervillain groups within the DC multiverse, including the Legion of Doom, the Injustice Gang, the Secret Society of Supervillains, the Superman Revenge Squad, the Secret Six, Intergang, Cadmus, and the Light. As Superman's arch-nemesis, Luthor has appeared in dozens of different live-action feature films, television series, animated series, and animated films. To me, the standout Lex Luthor performances are Stan Jones, who voiced him in Challenge of the Super Friends in 1978, the cartoon which introduced the Legion of Doom.
The meeting will come to order. The Legion of Doom is now in session. It is the purpose of the Legion to align our infamous forces against the powers of good and defeat them, leaving us, the rulers of the world. To do this, we have gathered together the 13 most ruthless villains on Earth.
Gene Hackman, who portrayed Luthor in the 1978 Superman the movie.
Good evening, Warden. I think these two men should be safe here with you now till they can get a fair trial.
Who is it, Superman?
Lex Luthor, the greatest criminal mind of our time.
Of our time?
I hereby serve notice.
He's serving notice to you.
That these walls
here.
Will you shut up, please, you?
All right, take them away, boys.
You don't hit me now.
Clancy Brown, who began voicing Luthor in the 1996 Superman animated series, and continued with the character throughout the run of the DC animated universe, right up to the last episode of Justice League Unlimited.
Actually, I'm glad you came. I have a deal to offer you.
I'm listening.
As long as I have the rock, you can't stop me. But it is bothersome to have you always trying. So, the deal is this. You leave me and my operations alone, and I and my little green rock will leave you alone.
I don't make deals with criminals.
I control everything in this town, Superman. Your cooperation is not really necessary. The offer was merely a courtesy.
You will never control me, Luthor. Never!
Well then, I guess I'll have to kill you.
And Michael Rosenbaum, who portrayed young Luthor in the series Smallville from 2001 to 2008, and returned for the series finale in 2011.
Yeah, I know about the green meteor rock and Clark's unique gifts.
What do you want?
The world, Mrs. Kent. And your son's gonna help me bring it to its knees. Now talk some sense into him before something unfortunate happens. Like that. Dad? You were right about me all along, Mr. Kent. I am the villain of the story.
The version of Luthor you see here from the Super Powers toy line made his first appearance in comics, in Action Comics number 544 in 1983. This was the first appearance of Luthor's power suit, which was designed by legendary superhero artist George Perez. Much like Jack Kirby's redesign of several New Gods characters for the Super Powers toy line, this would allow George to receive royalties based on the toy sales. This version of Lex Luthor was released by Kenner in 1984 as part of the first wave of the Super Powers toy line. The toy originally had an action feature called the Nuclear Punch, which was activated when you squeezed the figure's legs together. Unfortunately, in this example, the action feature no longer works, but he still has his full range of Super Powers articulation, which means the arms can move up and down, and he has hip and knee joints. His chest armor piece can be removed, and you'll find that many loose examples of this figure will be missing that armor piece. So I was lucky to find this complete Luthor in a thrift store bag of action figures. He's got a little bit of paint wear, and like I said, his action feature no longer works, but overall, it is a nice example of the figure. Another Luthor figure I have is this Toy Biz figure from 1989. Toy Biz had the DC license after Kenner for just 1 or 2 years and put out a brief selection of DC characters. By that time, the portrayal of Luthor in the comics was the evil CEO, so that's what this figure represents. Not a very interesting figure compared to the Super Powers one. But he does have an action feature, which is this power punch, where he sort of punches himself in the face. But the intent of this is to punch Superman because he is wearing a very small, if you can see it, ring of kryptonite. That's something that the modern Luthor always kept with him to protect himself from Superman. And here's yet another Luthor figure that was made by Mattel in 2007 for the Justice League Unlimited line, based on the animated series. And this is the animated version of Luthor as he was voiced by Clancy Brown. At this point in the series, he had been exposed as a criminal and was no longer head of LexCorp, so he was leaning more toward the Silver Age incarnation, where he was a mad scientist and super criminal. And these JLU figures are very simple 5 POA figures. Just arms, legs, and head. And one of the things about the JLU line is their difficulty standing up, because they are accurate to the character designs, which were informed by the Bruce Timm designs that started with Batman the Animated Series. So they have very thin legs and small feet. So sometimes it's difficult to get them standing, but this one's doing all right. Hope you enjoyed this month's trip into the Thrift Box and that history of Lex Luthor. And it looks like Superman has got his hands full with 3 different Luthors. But I'm sure the Man of Steel will prevail. He always does. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.